Your first day in court, a step-by-step guide. The topic I want to talk to you about now is something that's asked by us from a lot of clients and is so important in any context, especially in the criminal law context, and that is what to expect on your first day in court. What are the procedures? What are the etiquette? What are the typical scenarios that you can expect on this time that you go into court, which is probably the first time you ever have to be a daunting, fearful, frightening thing, something that keeps you up at night, but it doesn't need to be. The more education that we can give to you, the more that we can advise you as to what to expect. It's not just knowing about the law, knowing about what your defense would be, for example, in a criminal case, but what to expect when you literally walk through the door. So we think it's very important for a client to understand all these things. Now, typically speaking, in a criminal context, the first court appearance you're going to make is an arraignment. An arraignment is a process wherein, in the state of New Jersey for sure, you're going to either enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. 99.9% of the time, it's not guilty. And it's a very quick and informal process. So we try to tell clients, despite the fact that this word arraignment sounds like a big thing, not to be so overwhelmed by the court process. The more that we can explain it to you, the more you'll see that it's not as thrilling or as emotional as you think it would be. It's really the thoughts we have in our head about what something could be, or our lack of knowledge about what it'll be, that really causes the greatest torment and difficulty for our clients. But what can you do to prepare beforehand? Well, the first and most important thing to remember is show up. I know that may sound simple, but there's lots of people that forget the date or they forget the time they're supposed to be in court. And especially in the criminal world, this is the most important thing you can do. When individuals are released from jail or given bail in some states or released from detention, it's done with a set of conditions. And the first and most primary and important condition is that you show up on the day you're supposed to and at the time you're supposed to. If you don't, you could sacrifice your liberty at that point in time in a criminal courtroom. In fact, just don't show up on time, show up early. It's important for you to be able to understand that you're there, you're not rushing, trying to get through magnetometers when you walk into the courthouse. That's the process by which the sheriff's officers or the court administrators check to make sure that nobody has any kind of weapon with them. So you want to get there early so you're not rushing. You're going to be nervous enough. There's no sense in something making you more nervous because you're afraid you're going to be late for your court appearance. And the question people ask, or maybe they should ask and don't ask, is how do I dress when I go to court? And the answer that we would give is dress appropriate. We don't like to tell clients specifically what to dress because we don't want them to feel unnatural. But for example, I dress in many different ways and many different times, sometimes in a suit and a tie, sometimes in sweatpants and a t-shirt when I go to a gym. Well, a courthouse is not a place where you wear sweatpants and a t-shirt. You want to show that you respect the system. Now, a suit and a tie, to me, is always the preferable way to go. And while our society seems to be drifting away with that when we talk about things like business casual, there's nothing casual about a courtroom appearance, especially in criminal law, because your liberty is at stake. And while it may not seem fair, and some people may think it's politically incorrect, the first impression is usually a lasting one. The judge is watching you, the prosecutor is watching you, the court staff's watching you. So the better that you can be dressed and show that you're showing respect for the court goes a long way. Also, it suffices it to say that when you go into this environment, you're going to be a little bit nervous. There's going to be a number of people that you're going to encounter. We're going to go over that in a minute. But the mantra for everyone that you touch, everyone that has an encounter with you, is be respectful. Now, I say this because while many of our clients are great and decent people, because they're nervous, because they're anxious, because maybe they didn't sleep well the night before, they can have a tendency when they're being asked questions, and sometimes they can be asked questions by people who aren't necessarily being so nice to them. It's easy to lose your cool and not be respectful, but being respectful in a courtroom is a very, very important thing. Now, you should always bring your court notice with you. And when you walk into the courtroom, hopefully you will have arranged with your attorney to meet in the hallway before you walk into the courtroom. But if you go in the courtroom, There's a procedure where there's a number of individuals you're going to encounter. It's important to know who they are. One of them is probably going to be a sheriff's officer. Somebody obviously in a uniform with a badge and a gun. That's an individual who's providing protection inside the courtroom. The other players that are inside the courtroom that you'll know about are going to be both the prosecutor and the defense attorney. Now, typically speaking, at least in the state of New Jersey, the prosecutor's table is going to be closest to the jury box. So if you see a number of lawyer-looking people that are sitting at a table that's closest to the jury box, kind of be assured that those are going to be the assistant prosecutors in the case. Now, obviously, you're not going to have any encounter with them because you have your own attorney, and that's the individual you encounter. And the attorney's section is typically the table that's going to be furthest away from the jury box. Of course, both the defense table and the prosecution table are going to be facing the bench. And as you know, a judge who is the arbiter of the law in the case will be sitting at the bench. But there'll be other individuals there too that may be wondering, who are they and what are their roles? Many times there'll be a court clerk. That is a person who is in law school, a law clerk rather, in law school, who assists the judge in legal research and writing. But the other person is what we call a court clerk. Now, the court clerk is a person who is the judge's right-hand man or woman that helps assist run the functioning of the court. The court clerk is kind of the ringleader, if you will, of the courtroom to make sure that everything is organized. Many times, the attorneys will be going up to that court clerk and they'll be checking in, as they call it, saying, hey, my name's Bob Bianchi, and my client, Joe Jones, is sitting here in the courtroom, and we've either spoken to the prosecutor or haven't spoken to the prosecutor, depending on what the case may be, and let the court clerk know whether or not the case is ready to be heard before the judge or not. Again, for example, there's many types of proceedings that go in the courtroom. We'll cover that in another video. But in an arraignment, again, it's a pretty pro forma, pretty quick in and out procedure. The judge advises you of the charges. Your lawyer enters a plea of not guilty on your behalf. There'll be probably some discussion as to whether or not the prosecution has handed over discovery. That's police reports, investigative reports, things of that nature. And then another court date will probably be set where various other court proceedings, again, we'll talk about it in another video, will occur. Again, showing up is the most important thing. When you get into that courtroom, if your lawyer's not there, sit in what we call the gallery. That's the seat where the public sits. Sit there patiently, quietly. Hopefully your lawyer is going to let you know when they're going to be there if they're not there already. But that's the area in which the public sits. And of course, you know there's going to be a jury box in that courtroom. That's where ultimately, if the case goes to trial, a jury will be sitting. Now, the judge typically many times will come out on the bench, not always specifically at the time allotted for when you need to be there. And that's because the judges aren't going to come out until they know that there's actually people there, that the attorneys are there, and that there are cases that are ready to proceed. And cases can be in various different stages, the arraignment being at the beginning, all the way up until a jury being called for a trial, and many, many appearances that go on in between. So as the court clerk is letting the judge know which cases are ready, eventually the judge is going to come out on the bench. And what you may see, and some people find to be odd, but it's really an organizing principle, is the judge will call the list. You maybe hear these terms, call the list. And the judge is going to ask, is Joe Jones here? Is your attorney here? Are you there? Are you ready to proceed? What the judge is basically doing at that point in time is ensuring which cases are ready to proceed. And typically judges will do this differently. They have their calendars organized in a way where they'll take certain matters before other matters in order to try to accommodate as many people as quickly. In other words, if it's going to be a quick proceeding and it's something that they don't want to have you or one of your family members, whoever's charged, or the lawyer just sitting around for something that's only going to take 2 minutes to do, those cases will typically go quicker. And there'll be times that a court may take something out of term because of something like, say, for example, they need a translator. There's not that many translators. So they may take a case that may take a little bit longer, but handle it ahead of a quicker case because they have to worry about the timing of the translator and the need of other courts to use that translator. So the judge is basically, and the court clerk are doing a balancing act, trying to get as many things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So those are pretty much the positions of the individuals that you'll see that are in there. And some people will ask, okay, now the time comes for, let's say, your arraignment in this case, or another proceeding where your case is called. What's going to happen at that particular point in time in a criminal proceeding, because the defendant has a right to be at every stage of every proceeding, is that you and your attorney will walk up to defense counsel table and you'll stand there with the lawyer. And typically the procedure is when you are being spoken to, or you are being addressed by the judge, or you are addressing the judge, very important, always stand up. That's a matter of respect. So if a judge speaks to, even to this day, with all the years of experience that I have, and I know some judges are a little bit more harsh about that than others, I will always stand up to show the respect and courtesy to the court, that when I'm being addressed, I stand up as the court is speaking to me. And when I speak to the court, I stand up and I speak to the court. Now, do I see lawyers that don't do this? I do. And it's just something that's really nails on a chalkboard to me, because I think it's something that is extremely disrespectful. What's one of the most important things that you can do when you walk inside of that courtroom in order to be prepared for your first court appearance? And as odd as it may sound, as hard as it may be, relax. It's easy to be anxious. There is no need for you to be any more frightful, scared, nervous, or anxious than you already are. Your mind has already created a lot of negative and toxic scenarios. We understand at the Bianchi Law Group that going along with the charge and everything that it faces from a courtroom are all these collateral consequences that are occurring in your life, whether it be with your job or your family, or worried about finances or reputational loss. So you've already done enough beating yourself up, I'm sure. So you need to relax and not be anxious. I will tell you that there are very few moments in a courtroom where something monumental is going to occur that's going to be a break or make or break moment in that courtroom. In fact, being in a courtroom a lot of times can be kind of boring. The only thing that gets people excited is the own anxiety that they're creating. And a lot of times it's being created because they don't know the system and they don't know the process. And they don't know that we use a phrase all the time, hurry up and wait in a courtroom, because a lot of times it can be a very monotonous thing. So try to, as best as you can, to relax. Pick a good attorney. You're ready to go forward with the case. You've properly prepared, advised the charges, gone over the police reports and the information, start preparing the defense, start preparing an investigation if need be. You should already have all the knowledge you have as to what your attorney is going to do in order to make this process much easier for you. So do the best that you can to relax in the situation. The first court appearance, as I've indicated, the lawyer is going to do most of the talking. Very rarely will the defendant do any talking at all. You're not going to be asked any questions about the case. You're not going to be asked to give your a statement as to what occurred in the case. Rather, what's going to happen is that the court is just going to basically make sure they have the right biographical information from you. Where do you live, and how do they get in touch with you? Because what the court is most concerned with at the beginning of a case is to assure your appearance at future court appearances. And that is why it's important to be there early, be there prepared, be there well-dressed, be respectful, to calm the court down, to understand you are a person that will respect the rules and that you will be there throughout all of the proceedings. Now, knowledge is power in this environment. What I mean by that is, by the time you walk inside of that courtroom, you should know exactly everything that's going to occur, who everybody is, what their role is, what is the purpose of the proceeding that you're there for. And when you have that information, you'll be in a much better place to be able to navigate the difficulties of a court process, because there are many steps in that process. And if a good, strong lawyer is fighting and advocating for you, it can be kind of confusing. So it's the lawyer's job to make sure you're not confused as best as possible. And while I'm on that note, keep in mind, lawyers are human beings too. So are prosecutors, so are judges, so are court clerks, sheriff's officers, and jurors. We don't know sometimes what it is that you don't know. And in fact, sometimes it can be easy to kind of overlook things. We often speak in the law in acronyms, and we use kind of fancy terms to explain simple concepts. If that happens, and it's easy to do because we're just so used to that lingo, we're so used to that kind of information, speak to your lawyer about it and say, I didn't understand what that meant. It happens to me, and I say, you know what? I didn't understand that the client was understanding. This is so common to me. And I appreciate when a client says to me, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it again? We want well-informed clients because as the case progresses, significant decisions are going to have to be made with respect to your defense in the case and ultimately how this case is going to resolve. So our step-by-step guide as to what to do to be prepared is obviously hire the best lawyer you can afford, get as much information as you can, understand what that particular proceeding is going to be before, and trust me, when you know where it is, where you're going to sit and who the people are, and you understand that it's not going to be this monumental moment that's going to make or break a case, you can go through this process a lot easier. And last note, it is a process, and you have to crawl before you walk. So take a deep breath. Good lawyering and good criminal defense requires time to mature the case, to understand the case, to present the best possible defense for you in order to properly negotiate with prosecutors and fight the case out in the courtroom down the line where the proceedings will become much more adversarial than the arraignment is. I hope this was of help to you. If you have any questions, please look at our YouTube channel. We try to answer as many of the practical questions that we at the Bianchi Law Group get all the time. Our team of former prosecutors know the insides and outs of a courtroom from both sides of those tables, the one closest to the jury and the one furthest from the jury, because we've been in there doing it for so long. So we're proud and honored with the clients we represent, and I greatly appreciate you watching this video. I hope it was helpful. If it was, give us a click, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, because we've got a lot more informational videos for you that hopefully will help you better understand the process, which will allow you to better be prepared when you're facing criminal charges. Thank you.